this is a whole new this is a whole new category of electric bicycle, because this bike is nearly identical in weight to a nice road bike. So at the lightest, there's a version of this bike, the S-Works version, which is the super high end, is 28 pounds. So it's not a whole lot different than a regular road bike. This is the a carbon expert level. So this is about 32 pounds. The motor is in the middle as well. It is not a Bosch motor. Specialized is a big enough company that they have done a lot of their own development on motors. And they specifically designed a lighter weight engine that could build a lighter weight bike. And the battery is in the down tube. But if you look at this bike, you know, on the floor in the shop, like you can hardly tell it's an electric bike. The tubing is so thin. And when you pick it up, you can hardly tell it's an electric bike as well. So this is a really interesting category where, you know, it's the downsides on having an electric bicycle are not really present. You can pedal, there's no resistance from the motor, so you can pedal this without any power, and it doesn't feel like you're not pushing any extra weight. But with a very, very low assistance level, it just takes the edge off. And when you add a battery on board, there's a lot of other interesting things you can do beyond just the electric assist. And so I think Specialized is kind of the best example of this. All the bikes we have, you know, have connections with like an app and things like this, but Specialized has taken it a step further, and they have an app that, you know, does a lot of ride tracking, but also you can connect to like from a fitness perspective, you can connect it to a heart rate monitor, and you can actually have your heart rate monitor control the level of assist on the bike. So you can stay in you can set a target heart rate zone, and then the bike will literally adjust the assistance to keep you in your target heart rate zone as you're riding. So from a fitness perspective, that has huge implications, because, you know, you can get a really good cardio workout without the spikes that you would have if you're you know, go over or under. And the other interesting thing on a bike, oh, go ahead. Did I get a question? Okay. So that is another new category. And then
when was it introduced?
When has Specialized carbon? I don't know what model it is.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So then there is mountain bikes. This is a brand new bike that Specialized just came out with. And it's called the Kenevo SL. This uses the same motor system as actually is on the Creo, the road bike, but it's in a, you know, mountain biking form factor. This is sort of an enduro style a mountain electric bike. And the interesting thing about a bike like this is, again, it's not much heavier than a normal mountain bike, and yet you have this extra assist when you want it. But if you don't want it, you can turn it all the way off. So this is sort of the next frontier of electric bikes. And so you can see from this, you know, from all of this variety, that the you know, there's just like, you can't typecast what an electric bike is anymore. It really is any style of bicycle that you can imagine now exists in the electric world. And the electric power, one of the things that the electric power does is allow you to design very interesting bicycles. But the other thing it does is it allows you to add other features. So there's a lot of fitness components of, you know, tracking your rides and tracking your heart, you know, having your heart rate monitor adjust the bike assist and all of that. There's navigation. So there's a lot of the bikes will have a navigation built in. So Bosch has a really great navigation system that you can pick points of interest, and it's just turn by turn navigation, just like on a car. It beeps at you and shows you the direction that you're going. So there's all sorts of really interesting interesting things that are possible when you add a little bit of extra power. So yeah, y'all hear me? Yeah. What we realized, starting 10 years ago, but we opened our Bernal Heights store in San Francisco about 8 years ago. And what we realized was that, the test ride, no one, even the people who had ridden an electric bike may not have ridden a good electric bike. So the test ride became so important to sort of show and not tell what electric bikes can do and why they're so appealing. And so from early on, we kind of set up our shops around a test ride form. And so if you come into any of our stores, they're not enormous stores versus like a traditional bike shop that will have lots of bikes lined up, and hanging and on racks. But all the bikes we have on the floor are demo bikes. And so we have about 30 plus demo bikes in each store for test riding. And the idea is, you come and try a bunch of different bikes, and through test riding, you can kind of start, some of the expectations you might have about what style of bike is your style of bike may be a little bit out the window when you actually start test riding, because the rules of the game have changed a little bit. And so test riding is the best way to know that and kind of know that about yourself and know that about the bikes, and also experience just the quality, because, in our world, you can, and as I'm sure everyone knows, like you can go online and you can buy lots of bikes, but even the pictures that I showed you here, I mean, I think if you're a connoisseur, you can tell the difference in quality and manufacturing and all that, but you can't really tell in my experience, until you test ride, until you see it in person. And so the test, the proof is in the pudding, and that's what our whole stores are all about. So while we have the stores are pretty small and they look unassuming, we have a very big back end. So we have 2 stores, one in San Francisco, one in Marin. But then we also have a service center in San Francisco, which is, that's where all of our inventory is. So we have about 500 bikes in stock, and we just do a lot of the servicing is done in our service center, all the bike building. And so when you come to the store and pick out a bike, you don't typically leave with a bike. We either, we configure the bike and then we build it, and we either deliver it to you or you pick it up in one of the stores. Picking up in the stores is always preferred. But it allows us to have the stores really focused on test riding and the stuff that we can do in person in the store, which is test riding and trying it up really steep hills. And we've got really good hills in San Francisco. We've got really great hills in Marin. And so, you don't have to take our word for, what the bikes can do. You can try it for yourself. Hopefully, our goal is to have a store in the East Bay in the very near future. So we're working on that. At the moment, we do have home pickup and delivery in many parts of the East Bay. And, the Larkspur store is right off the Richmond Bridge, as Tom mentioned. You can actually ride there now from the East Bay. The San Francisco store is about a 10-minute ride from BART. And yeah, so that's a little bit about our stores and how that works. So now I would say, if I can open it up for questions, and yeah, anyone have anything that I'm sure I didn't cover?
I'm going to take the first position before I let anyone else. And you just raised a question in my mind. What about bringing e-bikes on BART and buses and trains for getting around, whether it's for utility or for being able to get out to a place to ride on?
Yeah. So there's bikes that are better. Like when we started, I started out of our apartment in Berkeley, but I did a lot of our test rides. I knew we were going to open the store in San Francisco, so I took my bike on the BART 10 years ago, and on BART, and I would take it down the elevator and all of this, but the bike 10 years ago was way heavier than it is today. The As far as what you can do, you can bring your electric bicycle anywhere you can bring on a regular bicycle, size permitting. And we have some very large size bikes, especially some of our cargo bikes are very, very large. But that being said, not everyone is going to want to, either carry. I mean, it brings up the next point, which is weight. So what does a bike weigh, and what is practical to carry? So traditionally, most electric bicycles are going to weigh between 45 pounds and 60 pounds. And depending on who you are, that's pretty heavy for carrying it up and down like a long flight of stairs. It's much easier to roll it. And most of these bikes have what's called walk assist. So if you have a ramp, it makes it very easy because you can press a button and the bike can move at a walking speed up the ramp. But otherwise, you have to carry the bike. And so going up and down BART, it's better to put it on an elevator or find a ramp. But a bike that's 45 to 60 pounds, if you're under like 5'8" or so, it's a little bit of a lift to do. And you're not, young and spry. It's quite heavy. Now, as of last year, things have changed dramatically as far as the weight is concerned on electric bikes. So, like I mentioned with like the Specialized Creo, that bike is not a whole lot different than a regular bicycle in terms of weight. And then Specialized has another model called the Vato Sl, and that is more like a traditional road bike with a flat bar handlebar. And that bike is almost like maybe 5 pounds heavier than a Specialized Cirrus non-electric. So it's really not, there's not a big difference there. And at weights under 40 pounds, many, many people can pick the bike up on their shoulder and carry it, no problem. That being said, the number one question we get is putting a bike on a car, and putting on the back of a car, on a car rack. And that too, there's really good bike racks these days that make it really easy to carry even a heavy bike and make it easy to get a heavy bike onto the back of a bike rack. And so like we carry a rack from Thule that has a ramp. So you just roll the bike up onto the ramp and onto the car rack and then lock your bike on, and it takes, 2 minutes and it's there. So sometimes to get the bike that you want with the features that you want, you might have to compromise on weight, but there's really easy solutions for making the weight kind of disappear for the most part. And when you're riding the bike, you never notice the weight. If anything, the weight will sometimes make it ride better. So
Okay, thank you.
That answered the question.
I'll pass on to others. Rick, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm just interested in knowing what Brett's thoughts are on a fairly lightweight road bike that still has the ability to carry some cargo in terms of pannier and a rack, and is relatively easy to secure, and is still light enough to go into a car or hang up on a rack in the garage. It seems to me that Specialized may have the best in that regard.
Yeah, I was just for ease of show and tell. I think right now there are Specialized is not the only brand that has lightweight bikes. They're becoming a bigger and bigger part of the market because it's a big requirement. If you want a bike that is good in not just being an electric bike but also as a regular bike, especially if you're from the perspective of a lot of people in this meeting here, like that has a whole lot of appeal. Then lightweight makes a whole lot. It's kind of a requirement. And so Specialized is not the only one. I would say that they have done the best job so far in building the complete package. around, not, not compromising in terms of, sometimes like you can get to lightweight in sneaky ways. Like you can get to a lightweight bike, but then the performance on a hill is like so not good that it doesn't really, it's not even worth having an electric system at a certain point. There are electric bikes out there that are like that are, but the specialized bikes are not like that at all. So, the bike that I mentioned on this presentation is the Turbo Creo SL. And this one, you can put a rear rack on this bike. And then you have, a little bit, you have some utility built in. But the other bike that I mentioned that I didn't show a picture of is the Vato Sl, which is a little bit more of their sort of more traditional sort of road active style bike. And this is the same bike in a low step frame with a rear rack and fenders, and they all come with lights. And so this would be, a kind of maybe a best of both worlds, like pretty practical for around town, but also very lightweight.
Do you have those in your store to test drive?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
It's been hard to keep them in stock, I'll say that. As everyone knows, the bike boom is real. And we have customers that ordered, this particular model has been one of the most popular bikes that Specialized came out with. And we have customers who put orders in like June of last year that are just getting bikes. But that's changing now. Things are really starting to, like, it's getting better across the board at all dealers. I would say you're going to start seeing more availability. So,
Okay, Rob, you had a question. You're muted still.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So there's the Thule rack that you mentioned, and there's my wife has a Trek Lift Plus. It's the old Shimano 6000 series, and so it's a fairly heavy bike. And she's having trouble getting it onto the rack now. So the rack that you were talking about is a Thule rack, and then
yeah, I'll just show it to you.
Who else has those? And that's the one that folds up into this little tiny package that you can throw in the back of your. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. They are the only. So this rack is actually an interesting one because this is the standard design for racks in Europe. So if you go to Europe, you'll see that the style of racks that we have here just don't really exist much in Europe, because the style of racks we have here don't work great for bikes like that have fenders often, and most bikes in Europe come with fenders. And so in Europe, they develop this different type of rack, and now I'm trying to find where the heck it is. Oh yeah, here it is. And it's I don't know of many, like this is the one that we found that is just all around is the best. Now, you'll notice from the reviews that it's not like 100% 5-star reviews, but I know from just selling this rack that like there's just a tiny bit of learning that needs to happen about how you operate it before it works really, really well. And so, I would definitely recommend, working with a dealer to just get a little tutorial on it, because if you don't do things like lock it, then the bike can fall off. And I know that that's probably what some of these reviews are about, but you have to read the manual to be able to know that. They don't say there, like, click it all the way through. But anyway, this rack has a ramp. It's very compact. It works with bikes that are step-through frames and have fenders. And so all around it kind of works, and it's rated for e-bike weights, no matter what that is. All around it kind of works the best, especially for like the utility-oriented bikes that have fenders. If you have a mountain bike or a road bike that has no fenders and is pretty, some of these road bikes now, electric road bikes, are basically the same weight as a regular bike. So you could probably use the same rack that you had on a regular bike, but this is going to be the way to go if you have a heavier bike.
Carol, that question, and then Phil after that. Carol? don't hear you. I don't see you. Well, in the meantime, Phil, go ahead.
So range of, what was it, 25 to 60 miles doesn't really meet most of the rides that we're interested in. I mean, 60 might, but
Totally.
so
so
one of the
yeah.
ways I could think of extending the range would be to carry a second battery with you, if it's easy enough to change them out.
Yeah. So the real range is, I'd say 25 to 60 just instinctually, because it's like we have to be very conservative, and it depends on a lot on who you're talking to. You know, it depends a lot on which bike you have and how you ride it. Now, a bike like this here that on the screen, Specialized has the smart system, which is called their range extender system. So they have a relatively, not a huge internal battery, but it's if you ride it in the low assist level, which you would typically ride on a group ride, for instance, you'll get about 60 miles to a charge even on the small battery. And then they have this range extender battery, which basically looks like a water bottle. And oh, here. Nope, that didn't work. Sorry. And the range extender basically, it looks like a water bottle, and it gives you about 50% more range on top of what you have on the internal battery. So then you're adding another 30 miles. So now you're looking at about 90 miles, you know, in a certain assist level. And the other really cool thing about, like, with Specialized is you can enter in a ride. So you could say, I want to go 120 miles and on the phone app, and then the bike will automatically adjust the assist to ensure that you have enough power for whatever ride you want to go on. So that's one way to do it. And then the other way to do it is we have bikes, you can take second batteries for sure. And we have lots of bikes that actually now are dual battery specifically. So this is like a pretty unique bike from Reese and Muller that is, the batteries in the frame, but they have a dual battery version. And with the two batteries, you can go 120 plus miles to a charge. So the range is becoming, and that's even using a decent amount of assist. And so if you're not using, and if you're riding in a group setting with if everyone's riding an electric bike and you're all kind of trying to go as fast as you possibly can, and you don't really look at your terrain, then yeah, even with the dual battery version of this bike here, you'll go about 70 miles, 60, 70 miles. But that's still pretty far. But if you're just a little bit economizing, you can go much, much further. And one other really cool feature on this bike is you can actually you can look on the bike itself. It has a little map, and depending on how much charge you have, it shows you on the terrain where you can ride. So it does all these calculations to tell you, oh, this peak is off limits, but everywhere down in the valley is no problem at all.
I can just see it when you're 80 miles out and you've got another 20 miles left in your battery.
Yes, yeah, you can do that, and I mean, it's really easy the way that these work is they're so fine tunable. So I've almost run out of power. You know, I have a cargo bike, so I have my daughter in the front, and I have myself, and I have a bunch of stuff, and we're heading home, and I realized I forgot to charge the battery, and so I'm like, oh, now I'm really screwed because I've got a hill to get back home. And I just, you can dial down the assist to such an extent that you'll work a little harder, but you can do it. So you're in the driver's seat for sure. You just might have to, put a little bit more sweat in.
And of course, another option, if you don't really need it, is to do a lot of your riding without the battery on. That's been my choice when I ride the e-bike. Is I'll see how much I can do until I have to put the battery on to get up the hill. So it lasts a long time. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah, I wonder if you have an opinion on, there are several places in the Bay Area that convert existing bikes to e-bikes, like they put on buffeting kits. Do you you have an opinion of conversion versus buying an entirely new bike?
So for many, many years, we did conversion kits from a system called Bionics, which you might have heard of.
Yeah, I've heard of
It
them.
was, yeah, they were one of the first. It was a Canadian company that came up with a very, very good system that you could convert any bike to an electric bike. But even when we were doing it, like the numbers of bikes that we would convert kind of got smaller and smaller and smaller. And because, you know, the purpose-built bikes were, you know, getting better and better and more integrated. Like we used to do conversions because you couldn't find, like we couldn't fit some people on their bikes. Like we just didn't have the sizing. We didn't have the features that people were looking on. So it made a whole lot of sense. And now that's changed a lot. And so then it's just so happened that Bionics went bankrupt. And then it was even more of an impetus to change. And so we haven't, like, what we did find was it was very hard to sort of guarantee the product. Because you have to be you got to think through a lot of the ramifications of when you add a motor on, and not all frames are like good enough to do it. Sometimes it's not really worth the investment because of the frame itself. Like, you know, it's just, you have to put enough work into the bike itself to make it to like get it up to snuff, sort of. And the kit itself costs more than what the bike might be worth to do all that stuff. So there was a lot of caveats, and for us, it just became challenging to like make it all make sense. And so that being said, there are, you know, the Bafang system is an option. And but if you do go that direction, I would say, you know, make sure you put it on a bike that you really like. You make sure you understand, you know, that there are some of the people who put motors on systems are not, you know, they like the idea of doing it, but they're not necessarily trying to build like a super safe and dependable and, you know, great riding bike. And so there's going to be some compromises there unless you find someone who's going to be really, you know, dialed into making it as good as it possibly can be. So it's definitely an option, and it can be a good option, but especially when you're on a budget. But that being said, there's also, you know, the price ranges are pretty broad, and there may be better uses for a regular bike than converting it potentially.
Ian, I think you're next.
Quick question about theft protection. You mentioned some built in, other than the wheel lock. Yeah, you dropping $4 to $8 on a bike and parking it, you know, at the cafe in the Mission or downtown Oakland. Would I be able to enjoy my latte?
It's a good question. That's the number one. I mean, there's two things that we talk about all the time, and it's like how much and what do I do about theft? And it's unfortunately with the pandemic, things like the whole bike theft thing has gotten out of control in the Bay Area in general, and San Francisco specifically has gotten really bad. We haven't heard about it as bad in Marin, and in the East Bay, I'm sure, you know, I haven't heard of specifically, and I know San Francisco is like epidemic levels right now. The good news is that most of the number one way that bikes get stolen are out of garages, not on the street, especially if you have a good locking system. And you can get locks that are very, very, very hard to get into. And honestly, the combination of a wheel lock, for instance, and a U-lock is a really good combo, because the wheel lock makes it very, like, a lot of these crimes are like people ride away with the bikes. And so the wheel lock stops the bike from being rideable, but the U-lock makes it, you know, hard to get. So there are we've been dealing with this for years. And so we just sent out an email to all of our customers, like making them aware of the increased theft issue, especially in the city, and helping them prepare. But the number one place we want to help them prepare, because the number one place that bikes are stolen is not out on the street at all. It's out of garages, and the thieves are getting really good at breaking into garages. Like beyond, they know how to do this now. Like, and if you have not secured your garage, actually, you go on our website, we have a page that is specifically about how to keep your bike safe. And so we have, you know, the number one thing, you start with a lock, a high quality lock. And you can get a very good high quality lock. Unfortunately, every lock can be broken if someone wants to get through it. With an angle grinder and time, they can get through it. And so, so you still want to, with the lock, you have to park your bike in a good place that's not like, you know, in a dark alley somewhere, because you want to make it obvious. And then we also have component locks, so that you don't have to worry about your saddle getting stolen off the bike, which unfortunately can happen if it's parked somewhere. And then there's locking in your garage. So that we have a whole, you know, this is all about garage security and locking your bike in your garage, because people never lock their bikes in their garage for the most part, and that's what happens. They break in and they get stolen. And then the other big thing is bike insurance. So like, no matter what you do, it's like you can get it under your homeowners or renters, or you can get special insurance, and we have links to special insurance just for bikes. But it's just like anything, like it's much better for peace of mind. Worst case scenario, if all else fails, and there are some sophisticated bike rings these days, unfortunately, and they're targeting every bike, not just electric bike. But having insurance makes it so you're not out of pocket. And then we have a bunch of other little tips here and there. Some of our bikes, the good news is the bike, like when you add a battery on board, you can do more sophisticated locking and stuff like that. So a lot of our bikes have, like a lot of the new Bosch systems, if you take the console off, the console and the whole bike is registered to you. And so when you park it somewhere, you take the console off, and that's your key. And if someone were to steal a bike and they bring it into another shop, they literally can't get the bike operational. You can't just buy a new console and stick it on the bike. It won't work. So and if they go to a shop and try to have it broken, like the shop has a note that the bike is stolen. So there's registration like that. There's some of our bikes have GPS built into them, so that you can track your bike down. And you can see where it is. And I think that's going to be coming more and more. You're going to start seeing GPS kind of standard on every bike, or a security system of some sort or another. Alarms, we have alarms built into bikes now too. Alarms and GPS combined, that's even the best. So there are really good solutions. It is something to be aware of, but like I park my bike everywhere. All of our customers do, but you just have to have a good strategy. And read this art, like we send this out before people pick up their bikes, because we just want to make sure that they are prepared on the strategy side of things.
Yeah, before we get any more questions, I know there are a bunch of other people with questions, and maybe we'll see how long Brett wants to hang around for that. But a couple of quick things. Michael Kovid, who's in charge of these seminars, has posted a survey, a post-event survey. So check that out in the chat section before you leave. Our president and supreme ruler, Marianne Joali, has a couple of announcements. You want to go ahead with that?
Sure. Thank you, Tom. First announcement is that we have our business meeting on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. We'll talk about a couple important topics, including raising our membership dues. I hope you have all seen the Wheel Truth announcement on the first page of the June issue. Also talking about updating our COVID protocols for group rides, because the state is reopening next week. And then finally, ideas for a club social maybe this summer. And then the second announcement is that we are resuming our ASSR this Saturday. I believe it's 10 o'clock, but maybe check the calendar, check the ride listing again, just to make sure. Saturday out of Arinda Bart. I'm leading a ride. Tom is leading a ride. Thank you, Tom. And we have 3 other ride leaders. Hope to see you at these events. Thank you.
Okay, Brett, again, I don't know how long you want to stay along with this. If people need to drift off, go ahead. But we have a number of people waiting with questions. Rob, you have another one, I guess.
Sorry, actually, you kind of answered it. I wanted to know if other people were doing what Van Moof is doing with the GPS tracking and the integrated theft tracking.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes, I mean, the first company to do that was Stromer, and they're a Swiss company. They have an anti-theft system. So they have an integrated SIM card and GPS, and if someone were to steal your bike, it has a horn too, which you can use as a horn. But also, when the bike gets stolen, if the bike gets stolen, the rear wheel locks up, and then there's a horn that goes off. So they're the furthest along of all the brands that we carry. But I do think you're going to start seeing that, not just Van Moof and Stromer, but on a lot of brands in the near future.
Michael, did you have a question or just comment? Michael,
no, I'm good. Thanks. I had something earlier, but I think it's been answered. Thank you, though.
Okay, Phil, you were next. You're muted. Phil, you're muted.
I am.
No.
Now
I
you're
don't
fine.
really have any questions. I just want to say thanks, Brett, for taking your time. And
Oh, my pleasure.
yeah, I was on a ride, one of our sub rides on Wednesday 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there were 3 e-bikes, and they did the loop from Nicasio over the Marshall Wall and down to Point Reyes Station and back, or whatever charges they had on that.
Yeah, my experience has been when I ride at 15 miles per hour or less or so, you can go really long. Like, the range estimates that I gave are meaningless when you're traveling at 12 miles per hour or so. 12 to 15 miles per hour. Every additional mile per hour up to 28 makes a whole lot of difference in terms of how much power is being used. So when you're, and again, a lot of these bikes, most of the bikes, like, they freewheel and pedal just like a normal bike. So, and the weight is only maybe 10, 15 pounds at most heavier than a normal bike. So it's not like it's adding all that much extra, that you couldn't pedal it either. I've definitely been caught without any power. And I've gone on rides with my friends without any, turning everything off. And I get more of a workout, actually.
Ian, you had another question. Ian? All right, how about Ross? You had a question about a battery.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether or not any of these batteries are compatible with 220 volt charging systems, like for electric vehicles.
Not at the moment. They could charge faster than, I think the fastest charger we have, Stromer has a 6-amp charger because they also have the biggest batteries. But what we're talking about in terms of size of batteries is just infinitely smaller than like an electric car. And so you can just plug it into a standard 110 wall outlet, and you can still, like on a Stromer with their fast charger, it takes about 3.5 hours or 4 hours to do a full charge from dead empty to full. And that's not with anything and any extra juice and 110. I don't think, they haven't really developed. They could even go, they could do an 8-amp charger too, if they wanted to. The manufacturers just haven't done that. And they could do that with 110. They wouldn't need more voltage to do it faster necessarily. So it's kind of a whole different mind. Like, as an electric vehicle, that's also one of the reasons why electric bikes have been always so appealing to me, is there's such an elegant use of electric power and such an efficient use, versus, I think electric cars are really important and good, but a lot of our trips can be accomplished, very nicely on a bike that weighs a fraction of the person who's riding it versus a 2-ton vehicle with one person in it. And so the efficiency and like the elegance of that, I think, is very, very appealing.
Well, I want to echo the comment Phil made earlier and say thank you very much, Brett, for the time you've spent with us and telling about these things. I know there are probably many other questions people have, and some of them are best answered by coming in and trying these bikes and seeing how much fun they are. So I'm going to say thanks to everyone who came tonight. We'll have a recording of most of the session available at some point later on, and hope to see folks out on the road, including this Saturday. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Thank you, Tom, for hosting.
My pleasure.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Brett?
Night.